What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with reactions to the classics. Today, I got a reaction to a top 10 of underrated albums / artists brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Slade Said. Thank you, Slade Said. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out that Patreon link below or the patron link on the end screen. We could not do it without the patrons. All right, Slade Said knows a ton about music. He says, for my July list, which is July of 2024 when I'm filming this, I decided to promote 5 albums that I find are very underrated, and they're all by artists which I don't think have featured on this channel, and he is correct on that. I have picked 2 songs from each album, so I think you'll get a better idea of how both the band and the album sound. The albums are ranked from 5 to 1. The last album will be my favorite of the titles, but I obviously like them all. So the music will not be in this video, but it's going to be at a Vimeo link below. Check it out. I had never heard of any of these bands, so it ought to be great. You see it below. We're going to start out with the band Poster Children, the album Daisy Chain Reaction. Slade Said our first entrance on the list is the band Poster Children with the album Daisy Chain Reaction. Poster Children is a noise pop band from Illinois who to this date have released 9 LPs. They're formed all the way back in 1987 and still exist today, although their last album's from 2018. And before that, there had been a 14-year break between albums. The album quality is generally high, and they all pretty much could be a pick for this list. My first encounter with the band was their 3rd album, this one. The album was released in 1991, and again the year after on a major label when grunge were hitting big, and with some luck, the band could have easily been one of the major hitters. The album was produced by the late, great Steve Albini, and the band at this time consisted of the following members: Rick Valentin on vocals and guitar, Rose Marshak on bass and vocals, Jeff Dempsey on guitar, and Bob Rising on drums. Our first song you see below is If You See K. Slade Said the first song I picked is the obvious potential hit song, which sounds very much like Nirvana with some Black Francis from the Pixies, of course, vocal screams on top. All right, I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Slade Said. All right, If You See K, and from the lyrics, I think you should just keep away from her because she sounds like she's not the best girl, right? But he really does sound like Black Francis. I mean, I don't think Slade Said put that in my head. I think that was already there. But Rose Marshak's bass work on this song is absolutely outstanding throughout. It starts out and it just drives you throughout. It is fantastic, but a really good song. So now we're going to go to the quote title track, Chain Reaction. Slade Said a great song which shows that this is not just a Pixies Nirvana cover band. So in the first track, I was praising Rose Marshak's bass, but in this one, Jeff Dempsey and probably Rick Valentin on guitar work, and then Bob Rising on the drums. But the guitar work was absolutely fantastic. But the song, really well done. Great vibe, great atmosphere. Doesn't feel like it's 4 minutes, 40 seconds long at all. It's the highest compliment I can pay a song. So what I'm doing right here, I mean, I'm picking the albums, right? So at the end, if you guys watch this channel all the time, I pick my favorites, but this time I'll pick my favorite albums. But I have to give each song a grade so that I can kind of go back and figure out what album I like the best. But now it's time to move on to another band. And you see it, we got Starlight Mints, the album The Dream That Stuff Was Made Of. Slade Said they were an experimental indie pop band from Norman, Oklahoma, which is the same state as the Flaming Lips were from. We got a little Flaming Lips up. Search it in that bar up above when you're done with this one. And they do share some musical soundscapes. The band was formed in the mid-90s and released 4 albums between 2000 and 2009 before they disbanded after their final show on December 23rd, 2009. Merry Christmas, everybody, right? There were a good number of different members in the band, even on this album, but the main members of the band from the start to the end was Alan Best on lead vocals and guitars, and the band's main songwriter, Andy Nunez, who's credited as the band's drummer on the wiki page, but on this album he plays guitars and keyboards while drums were handled by a couple of other people, and Marion Love Nunez, keyboards and backing vocals. You see it below. We're going to start off with The Bandit. Slade Said the by far most streamed song on Spotify from the album is the album opener, Submarine 3. Well, I do like it. It's very short, at just below 2 minutes. It's pretty much over before it begins. So I decided to go with the second song of the album, The Bandit, which is pretty good representative of the band's goofy sound and where there really are no rules. And at the same time, they still managed to put out what is a great pop song. The Bandit, I enjoyed that. Just a quirky little song. It almost sounded at times like something Lennon would have done in his solo career a little bit. But, I mean, a good song. The second song from them is going to be Cracker Jack. It's a 60s influenced psychedelic folk rock song, Slade Said. It's definitely a grower, and it's my favorite song of the album, which is packed with very good and interesting songs. On this song, only Alan Vest, vocals and guitars, Dave Sardi on bass, and drummer Larry Mullins are credited. A very pleasing song sonically, especially as we ramp up to go to the chorus. It just has a great sound to it. Also, sounded a little Lennon-esque with the kind of vocal, I don't want to say echoing, but there's a little effect on it, or a little, they're not distorting his voice, but there's a little something there. But Starlight Mints, 2 good offerings. This one's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. We've got 2 albums down. All right, we've had some good names so far, and this is definitely no exception. We've got the Green Pajamas and the album Ghost of Love. Slade said our next band on the list is another long-living act that has not received a lot of commercial success. The Green Pajamas is an alternative rock band from Seattle, Washington, but they were never part of the grunge scene. They were too early for that. Rather, their style is more closely related to the Paisley underground scene from Los Angeles, as they have a 60s psychedelic rock focus, and the band was actually formed with the hope of creating a Paisley underground scene in Seattle. The band released their debut album all the way back in 1984, and they still exist today. Depending on what you include as band releases, the band has released between 26 and 35 studio albums, so it's a very prolific band. On this album, the band consisted of the following: Jeff Kelly on lead vocals, guitars, keyboards, and percussion. Jeff out here putting in the work, right? Steve Lawrence on guitars, alto sax, and percussion. Joe Ross on bass and percussion, and Carl Wilhelm on drums and harmonica. Jeff Kelly and Joe Ross are the founding members of the band and have been involved in it all the way up until today. Jeff Kelly is the leading songwriter and wrote all the songs on this album. We're going to start out, you see it below, with Servicing. The first song by the Green Pajamas is the lead-off track on the album, a beautiful and sad ballad. All right, Servicing, really well done. Almost a little REM type instrumental on there at different times, but definitely a sad song. I think the parents had died. And Do You See? It's a very emotive, well done vocal on it. You feel the emotion. It's just really well done. Now, so like I said, our next pick on here is the very next song. We got, the pace picks up a bit on this one, which is a lovely mid-tempo folk rock song. We got The 1,000 Days. The 1,000 Days, really well done. There are 2 songs from the Green Pajamas. The writing is much better than on the first 2 bands, so because it wasn't about the writing on the first 2 bands, so I'm not like marking them off for it. I'm just saying the writing on these 2 songs were really well done. I think the drumming on this one from Carl Wilhelm was fantastic, but also so was that bass work from Joe Ross, guitar work, like all of it just worked. But Jeff Kelly, really good lead vocalist because he makes you believe it, right? On songs like this they're more storytelling, almost sad, really, on both of them. This one not as sad as the other one, obviously, but you really feel it. So good choice, the Green Pajamas. We still got 2 bands left. We got 7 Seconds, their album Soul Force Revolution. Slade said 7 Seconds is a hardcore punk band from Reno, Nevada that moved towards alternative rock for a few years before returning to their punk roots. They're said to be the first band to label themselves hardcore, while their more mainstream albums have been very influential on both pop, punk, and indie rock in the 90s onwards. They were formed in the early 80s and released their debut album in 1984. They have had a few breaks, but are still active today, with the only permanent member being lead vocalist and songwriter Kevin Seconds, 7 Seconds, who has also released a number of solo singer-songwriter albums, folk punk style. The band slowed things a bit down on the second full-length album, New Wind, from 1987, and in 1989, they basically went all in on indie rock with this album, Soul Force Revolution, which included much more developed melodies compared to their previous work. The fan base wasn't pleased at all, as they often aren't when you change up, right? But I personally think it's their best work. On this album, the lineup was Kevin Seconds on lead vocals, Chris Carnahan on guitars and backing vocals, Tony Mowat on drums, Steve Youth, brother of Kevin Seconds, on bass and piano. Kevin wrote all the songs. Our first song, you see it here. Ever since I got this thing ready, I've been dreading this one. Satyagraha. Probably wrong, but Slade said I picked the lead-off track. It's one of the songs here. This is a great album opener, perhaps the best song on the album. It definitely gave the old hardcore fans a scare and an idea of what to expect. Satyagraha, it's a policy of passive political resistance, especially advocated by Gandhi against British rule in India. And I mean, you kind of get that. It's not specific to that, but that kind of mindset throughout the song. But I mean, in a style like this, the drumming's fantastic. Vocals are well done. It drives you through. So yeah, I think it's a really good track. Next up, we got 4 a.m. in Texas. Slade said, I know you're from Texas, Sean, so I thought it fitting to pick this song. I hope it's not that late when you hear it, though. It is not, I promise you. It starts as a sort of ballad that does eventually pick up speed. All right, 4 a.m. in Texas. Trust me, I'm in Texas. It is not 4 a.m., but really well done song. Again, you ever been up late at night and your brain starts going and you can't shut it off? That's what he's experiencing towards the end of this song. But Kevin Second's great on lead vocals, but drums, Tony Mowat, fantastic, and Chris Carnahan on the guitars as well. But yeah, that was really good. All right, we're to our last band and album. We got Government Issue off the album You. Just like 7 Seconds, Slade said, Government Issue was a band that started as a hardcore punk band, but later developed into something else. Earlier on, they were classic hardcore punk with very short songs and very short albums. I remember buying the 1985 album, The Fun Just Never Ends, which had 9 songs with a total running time of around 15 minutes. It's a great LP, but I got pretty tired of having to change sides all the time since it was almost over before I sat down. The struggle we had back in the day, boys and girls, we actually had to get up and turn the record over. Like, it's a long time ago. As they gradually slowed things down, the songs became longer and, like 7 Seconds, much more developed. And the album You from 1987 is their magnum opus, and the band themselves also stated that. The band is one of the early hardcore bands, as they were founded in 1980 and released 7 studio albums between 1983 and 1988. They've had a good number of different members during their career, but on You, the following made up the band: John Stabb on lead vocals, Tom Lyle on guitar, Jay Robbins on bass, and Peter Moffat on drums. You see the first track we're going to listen to down below. We got Carrying Line. It's an up-tempo punk rock song, which Slade said thinks represents the album well. Carrying Line, it's a great song, man. Great little punkish vibe to it. So, of course, the guitars and the drumming is going to be banging in there. And the Carrying Line, don't want anybody to get too close to you, right? I don't really advise this, but he's saying don't want anybody to get close to you. There's a fine line on that Carrying Line. And we're going to finish this album out and this fantastic top 10 list with Where You Live. The second pick from the album is not very far removed in style from the first pick and is another great up-tempo song, somewhere between alternative rock and punk rock. All right, Where You Live, just another fantastic driving song, much like the first song, as Slade said. It's not a long song lyrically, but the drumming, the delivery, the guitar work, I mean, I can see why. You know, if you remember at the start, Slade said they were organized from 5 to 1, but he likes all the albums, but I can see why this was his favorite, which is going to bring me to my favorite. You know, I told you I graded each song. I was only going to pick 2 albums. Now I got to pick 3 because 2 of them tie. But the very first album by Poster Children, Daisy Chain Reaction, and 7 Seconds, the album Soul Force Revolution tie. And then my very favorite was this last one, Government Issue, and their album You. Thank you to Slade Set for this creative top 10. Super enjoyed it. Super enjoyed the way that he put this thing together. Let me know what your favorite is down below, or you can choose a couple. Heck, I chose 3. I hadn't planned it, but you got to do what you got to do. And until next time, guys, I will see you.